Hello and welcome to Nintendo Nostalgia. I'm your host Ryan Black, and I am joined by my co-host Joshua Taylor, and we are back and we are playing with power. Josh, how you doing this week?
Not too bad so far.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I'm doing well myself, and without wasting any more time, let's get into what we are radical rexing about. Okay, Josh, what you got for us this week?
All right, so this week, well, actually for a little while, my Switch that I got on release day, it had been making a lot of noise with the fan. It sounded pretty awful, almost like a jet taking off for quite some time on and off. And as of the last week or two, it started overheating. So like I'd play for a little bit, and it was kind of various times. Like one time it was like an hour, but then it was like 30 minutes the next time. It
Hmm.
would overheat and go to sleep. So I figured that probably isn't good for it over
No
time.
bueno.
So I had to figure out something. It looked like it was going to cost some money if I sent it in, and then I'd have to take 6 weeks or whatever it was going to take for it to ship, them to fix it, ship it back, and all that. So instead of all of that, and trying to make this story as short as I can, we also had an extra Switch Lite I'd gotten for free a while back. Long story short, so trying to sell that for some extra dough towards it. But basically, I ended up getting a new Switch, working on transferring everything over, which is quite a process, especially with Animal Crossing. It's a
Hmm.
little more confusing than they make it sound. um, but yeah, I actually was able to find the Animal Crossing special edition Switch that looks really nice. I really like that.
It
Um,
is.
yeah, I like the white dock and the Joy Cons, the different colors on it and everything. I really like that one. So I'm really happy I kind of had an excuse to make that work. um, so yeah, I ended up getting that this week. It's nice and fresh, and there's no, not that my Switch is scratched up, but there's no scratches on it, and it just feels good. So I'm pretty happy about that. Now, and outside of that, we've got, what is today? 2 weeks from today, I'll be in Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World. So I'm very
Woo!
happy about that. So yeah, I'll probably be on next week, and then I'll probably have to be taking a week or so off. But yeah, definitely looking
Completely
forward to
understandable.
that. And also, it has its struggles, but I'm still trying it, and hopefully one of these days, the right person sees it or shares it. But and I end up getting some views. But I started streaming on Facebook today instead of Twitch. Twitch was getting to be a little bit of a pain for everybody. And long story short, we decided to just go to Facebook for now. So that's interesting. I'm hoping maybe I'll have better luck there over some time here.
Mhm.
So yeah, had I guess a decent bit going on for once here.
Good.
How about you?
Well, I am just still hyped about the direct, and it was so exciting. Skyward Sword, it's coming to
Oh
Switch. Like
yeah.
so many good games are on the Switch, and just they keep adding more and more, and it's great. I was able to get a hold of the Joy Cons, so I'm definitely gonna be getting those Zelda Joy Cons. I'm really excited
Cool.
about that. I was able to grab them really quickly at GameStop when they first went up. I don't even know how, but it
You got
worked out.
lucky.
So, I just got to save up for it. Luckily, they don't do that immediately charge you for it thing that GameStop used to do. So that helps a little bit to save for it, especially with COVID and everything. So, but yeah, that's one thing. The other thing that I am just absolutely just loving is Dragon Quest 11. Like I can't stop playing it. That Mario game came out, and I don't even know that there's a Mario game anymore. Like it's on my Switch, but nope. The only thing that's playing right now is Dragon Quest. There's nothing else. It's just I just finished like just a few minutes ago. Finished Act One, and wow, what an ending to Act One. My goodness, that was intense. So I'm hooked. I just adore Dragon Quest games. I think I still prefer 9, but I still have a lot to play on this game. So we'll see. But the social aspect was kind of a big factor that was unique that this one does not have. But uh, and it's beautiful. Like the cutscene at the end of that was like, wow, this is
Yeah.
Switch. This is great.
Tried the demo for that game myself, and like I said, I liked it. But it's definitely something I wouldn't always play, but it was pretty interesting. I don't know if I'll ever get, be able to pick it up and what have you, but it is pretty interesting. I could see the appeal.
It took me with all the grinding and stuff that I did just for the fun of it, and item collecting and stuff. I'm sitting at about 50 hours in my first after completing the first act. So keeping pretty on task. I hear it's about a 120-hour game, so I think I'm doing pretty good. I'm definitely well leveled. I don't have to
Yeah.
grind or anything. Taking down enemies pretty fast. But plot twists kind of change things with the story, so it might be a little different going forward here. But I'm kind of curious to see what that involves. Other than that, I think that's about everything for what I'm radical rexing about. There's not a whole lot of games on the horizon that I'm wanting to pick up um, coming down the pipeline until Zelda. It depends on when World Ends With You comes out, but
Yeah.
until then, I'll just keep hanging out and playing what I've got. Got a lot of backlog from Christmas anyway that I got for games that I got. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the topic. We are recording this today on the 35th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, so we figured we'd do the original Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda. What an amazing, amazing game this is. Truly captivating. It took the world by storm. It was released on the Famicom Disk System first in Japan on February 21st, 1986. And then the NES US received it on August 22nd, 1987. Wow, that was a long wait, but it was totally worth it because absolutely a masterpiece of a game. For something on the NES, it wasn't just arcade. Actually had a save mechanic, and you could actually have story progression. At the time, that was pretty unprecedented. Josh, what were your first experiences with this game?
So this one, really with my first experiences with it, I probably can't remember. My dad actually had it because I was born in '89, so I was a little late to this one. But he and I know he loved the original Zelda and 2, and him and my uncle went through and beat him and everything. They actually had hand-drawn maps. I wish they would have kept those. I wish I still had those. But anyhow, he had traded in his NES for the Super Nintendo. So there went that. I think he still regrets that. But the first time I actually remember playing it was, I'm wanting to say Animal Crossing on the GameCube,
Mhm.
which you needed, and we might talk more about that here in a moment, but you needed an action replay to unlock it on there. But it was either that or like it came out, what was it, on one of the collections or something like that on the GameCube. So yeah, it was
Mhm.
around that time, and I feel like I played it a little more on the Wii and things like that. I do have the old cartridge. I did eventually go and pick one of those up just kind of for the sake of having it. So yeah, it was definitely one that was after I'd played several other Zelda games.
So I was really, really young, and when I remember like seeing The Legend of Zelda for the first time, and I remember seeing the gold cartridge, I've got some nostalgia for the location as well. So my dad owned a house near a local college here in Indianapolis, and he met my mom there, and he always held on to the house. He would rent it out to people after he left and moved on after he got married and everything. But he'd rent it out to people. And one time he went over there to work on some maintenance for something, and he took me along over there. And college kids were hanging out, and they had their big, those big wooden TVs, and they had The Legend of Zelda sitting there. They had their NES, and I was like obsessed with their NES. Like, what games do you have? What games do you have? And on the very top there, sitting on top of their TV set, was this gold cartridge, and I was just like, I want to play that game. It's so pretty. And so they put the game in, and they didn't really hand the controller to me or anything, but they kind of played around kind of demoed it for me a little bit, and I thought that was so cool. Like, oh, this must be like super rare because it's got golden color, and oh, this is the coolest game ever. It's just such an early memory, and it always stuck with me. I never really played Zelda up until Ocarina of Time myself. Well, I should say I'm I'm not sure if I played Link's Awakening before or after Ocarina of Time. They were pretty close around each other. I may
Uh,
have actually played Link's Awakening
That's about the same
prior,
here, honestly, between those two games. Yeah.
really close. So it was a while before I actually got to experience The Legend of Zelda on my own, and that was when I sat down and played it, like truly played through it. When the GameCube Special Edition disc came out, that had the first game, the second game, and then the two 3D games from 64, all on GameCube on a promotional disc. If you pre-ordered the Wind Waker, if I remember right, is that right? Or was the promotional disc?
Oh, now it's all kind of blurring together because there was a promotional disc with Ocarina of Time and Master Quest as well,
Okay,
and
so the promotional disc. Well, then how did you get the other one?
I don't remember.
Wasn't Twilight Princess, was it?
No, no, it might have just been like a single release. It was a special way of doing it because honestly, I'm very surprised I didn't find a way to get this because I've always been a big Zelda fan. I don't
Hmm.
actually have that one anniversary disc, or not anniversary, but collection. So I don't remember.
I know I had both um, at some point, but I just can't remember how I got a hold of them. I mean, obviously through the legit means. I
Right.
remember picking one of them up from GameStop, which was probably the when the Wind Waker thing happened. But it's kind of crazy. Like I wish they did something like that today, but scalpers would be all over that.
Oh gosh.
Um, so with the original Legend of Zelda, it has that famous line, a famous opening. It's dangerous to go alone. Here, take this, and you pick up your sword and start your grand adventure. How iconic is that? So, Josh, I've got to know: have you beaten this game?
I have. I think I've beaten it twice. Like
Okay.
got all the heart piece or heart containers. I was gonna say
Ah,
full completion, but really all there is beating it and getting the heart containers, I guess. But
okay.
um,
Did you
if
do
I
both
remember,
adventures?
I have not beaten the second one actually. I've played through it some, and I started it again not too far back,
Mhm,
and I ended up getting stuck. Like I actually really like the original. I like
mhm,
it better than some of the other 2D ones, but um, some of the ways it's aged, some things still hold up pretty well, but in some ways it has aged. Like when you die, it puts you back at the beginning of the dungeon you're at, or just if you're in the field out at the beginning with only 3 hearts left,
mhm,
which it becomes a real big problem later on. And just gets kind of frustrating, and you have to wander all the way back to a ferry or something to get your hearts back, and hope you don't get hit. And I think even like the second quest on there is not only just harder, just things are more cryptic, like almost more frustrating
mhm.
than they are like as fun and surprising to figure out like they are in the original quest. So no, I haven't beat the second quest. I've played a decent bit of it, but the first one I've definitely went through a couple times, maybe 3 times. I can't remember now. I think the first time I beat it was on Wii, to be honest, on the Wii Virtual Console.
Mhm. You pretty much have to bomb like every wall in the second one. I felt like in the second
Yeah.
adventure playthrough, which was actually cool that you could get to it right away. If I remember
Mhm.
right, you could just name your character Zelda and play with the second version of the game. It's
Yeah.
supposedly a hard mode. Um, it's more like a remix, I guess, in this era. Would you say that, or would you think it's actually like harder as well?
It's more than a hard mode, I would say too. It's just I can't remember if like enemies do more damage or anything like that. I believe just things are more complicated to figure out than they were even originally.
Mhm,
Um, if I remember correctly, it's probably only been a couple years now since I've tried it, but it's definitely a little different than I feel like a lot of hard modes now just kind of ups the damage done or damage taken or whatever.
mhm,
Um, so I have to commend them on actually even including that in there. It is, it's a whole new set of dungeons, so to speak. Like the layouts are different and things like that.
mhm. So the controls, you get NES controls, so there's not a whole lot of buttons to work with. But the way that they set it up, you move with the D-pad, and then you have your A for your sword attack, and then you have a secondary item for B. Um, and then start brings up your menu, and then select will move the cursor on the save screen and pause as well. So pretty basic controls on the NES, not a lot of buttons to work with, but it worked really well. The secondary item, you've got your traditional kind of bombs that you work with, and then later on you can pick up. Is it a raft that you can get? I want to say.
Yeah.
For your secondary slot, what items did they bring to the table for that?
For the secondary slot, I actually don't have it pulled up in front of me. I apologize. I know
You're
the
good.
raft was more of like it didn't go in the slot so much as it was just something you had. Like when you got
Okay.
to like boardwalks, or so to speak, like on big bodies of water, you could walk up to them and it would take you straight across it to say like an island or something like that. Um, so that's how that one worked. Now I know some of the items included like a boomerang, um, the candle that you could use for
Hmm.
different things. There was an upgrade to that as well. Um, let's see, the bow and arrow, which worked a little funny in this one. Like you'd find the bow, I think in the first dungeon, perhaps, but you had to go buy arrows from the store. And once you bought the arrow, you could use rupees, or it would like your arrows would cost a rupee to use. So this was a little strange. Um, what else was on there? I'm trying to pull it up, but
You've
yeah,
got
there's
the recorder, so you got your staple music item in Zelda. So
hmm
they brought
yeah, there
classic.
was actually.
I mean,
Go ahead.
you can't forget your shield.
Yeah. So yeah, and you started with the shield. That wasn't even unlike sort of the Game Boy games. It wasn't even like the second slot. It was just kind of there.
Hmm.
You could get an upgrade to it. Another thing was, of course, the bombs, um, which were pretty required for this one, especially if you were trying to find all of the heart containers and things like that.
You've got your usual potions. I think they had like a blue and a red one. Or, well, I guess according to this, it was like water of life and then second potion. But you have your magical rod as well, as an option, which is kind
Yeah.
of cool. Rods have been a big thing um, in Zelda in a lot of different forms, and it's kind of cool that that started with the original. If I remember right, there was even a letter that you could get. I want to say that you could sell it.
There is a letter in this. I believe it goes from, oh gosh, I should know the answer to this. I want to say a moblin to like an old lady or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, I could be getting some things confused, but yeah, you can't actually sell anything. But one of the items you do have to get that you have to buy is food. It's like a big hunk of meat, and you have to give that to a moblin, I believe. And then there's like the step ladder that you can get across, like just little paths or little creeks or rivers, sort of.
Mhm.
So that was kind of handy, and it never really came back again. Um, I'm trying to find some other ones. There's the magic book. You could pair it with the red. Let me see here. Well, I'm sorry. It says the red allows the user to cast fire magic. There's the magic rod. I think you said that one. There's actually a decent amount of items in this for it being like the first game
Mhm.
in the series.
It's kind of funny. This game has had it kind of sparked a genre, and it had many knockoffs. Like I remember, I'll briefly mention this one. There was like a Bible-based game.
Yeah.
Um, I think it was Spiritual Warfare. That was pretty much just a Christianese like adaptation of The Legend of Zelda, essentially. But there's games that try to imitate this, but nothing's quite like the classic. There
Yeah.
was some of the common items. You're running through the Triforce. That's something that's run through the whole series. This was only one part of the Triforce. The three parts were not introduced until later. So you were just collecting. I think it was the Courage one this whole time. If I remember right, it may. I don't think it was Power. I think it was involving that. Do you remember which one that was?
I believe it is courage. Yeah, you're basically just finding pieces to that one piece of the Triforce. If I remember correctly, again, I just played this again on stream like 2 hours ago, including reading the story. And Yeah, I'm looking here. The Triforce, one of power and one of wisdom. So yeah, basically though, you are only collecting shards of one of the pieces of the Triforce.
Hmm. And if I'm right, there was 8 pieces total.
Yes. Yep.
And then each dungeon had its own compass and map, and of course the small keys. Just that's something that's always been a staple in Zelda's, were these compasses, dungeon maps, and keys. Up until Breath of the Wild, I would say. I don't know if they've excluded it from any others that were mainline, but they're pretty much staples in the series. So that started right with its roots. Of course, you got your heart containers. There was a clock in this game that when you grabbed it, it would essentially stop the enemies in their tracks, kind of freeze them. I think it's timed. I think they can eventually come out of that. I don't think you have to run off the screen and go back for it to reset, but that was kind of a cool thing. I don't know if that clock has ever been used before, but you could argue that Ocarina of Time was not the first game that used the time mechanic with this clock, freezing time. Um, then of course your classic money, your rupee. That's always been in every Zelda, I think.
Yeah, I guess you could say sort of to a small aspect maybe that time has sort of been a thing in Zelda since like the beginning, if you look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a timeline.
Yeah. I think they've even changed things around since Hyrule Historia some, so
Mm-hmm.
who knows? I do like to try to figure it out, speculate it, and all that. It's kind of fun.
So some of the
But
levels and dungeons that you'd come across, they all looked kind of the same. They've got like kind of like a house or some kind of structure that has an opening. Usually there's like shrubbery or trees or something surrounding it on all sides, and you kind of walk into the dungeon. Um, Most of them are shaped about the same. I think there's one that was just randomly like in a bush or something like that, or near like it didn't make much sense. They were just kind of there.
if
Um,
you really look at them, actually, they're all shaped like different things. I don't think it
mhm,
says it in the game, but like the dungeon one, like if you look at like the instruction book thing, is well, what I'm looking at here is an eagle.
mhm.
And if you go back and kind of look at the layout, it sort of is. It's almost like looking at constellations or something, the way they're laid out, I guess. And like Dungeon 2 is the moon. Yeah, it looks like a crescent moon.
Hmm.
I'm going to say 3 wrong. They call it a Magi?
Manji.
Manji? Okay, well, um, and then like the next one's snake. I guess I could, at this rate, I'll go ahead and finish it. Dungeon 5 is a lizard. But let's see, Dungeon 6 is dragon. Dungeon 7 says demon. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to look like, but there you go. And then Dungeon 8 is a lion. So,
Demon is that's where the water clears for the fairy fountain, and then there's like stairs going underground.
yeah,
So kind of like journeying underneath the earth, that kind of idea with demon. So I think
yep.
is what they're kind of going for with that. The lion is strange just because it's just I don't know, just a random staircase, like surrounded by trees. There's not much of an
Yeah.
entrance, a grand entrance or anything like that. It just kind of pops up. And then, of course, you got your classic Death Mountain, which has appeared many times in the game. It's kind of interesting that um, this ninth area um, is the Death Mountain that you've seen in pretty much all different iterations. I most associate Death Mountain with Gorons, but it's very different in the first game.
Yeah, it is. It lives up to its name maybe a little better in the first game. It is
Yeah,
extremely dangerous.
that it is, and
um,
it's also skull shaped as well. The layout
yes,
of the
yeah,
map.
it's big. It's big. There's a ton of enemies in it that are just a huge pain in the butt, including Ganon at the end of it, of course. It's a doozy.
So there's a few other locales in the game in the overworld. You traverse Death Mountain in general, and you also have like fairy fountain locations where you can go and you can get healed. Also, there's a graveyard, complete with even I think I want to say the gravestones had crosses on them, and then also controversially, the shield that Link had a cross on it as well. There's various item shops. You have your Lost Woods in this game, like where you go. and you keep going. You can infinitely keep going from one screen to the next if you don't go in a certain order. And there's also a hint you can find that'll tell you how to get past that. A couple of mini games here, there. You've got your regular shops. You got your starting screen where you go in and see the old man. There's not much you do with that starting screen. I don't think you ever go back there once you get your sword. I don't think there's any other significance to that starting point other than you get dumped back there whenever you die in the main world, in the overworld. So
Yeah, it kind of becomes something you don't want to see after a while. And there's really nothing there after that first time you get the sword and leave. Now there is a lot of out of all the Zeldas, this one I think is probably one of the most cryptic, where a lot of later ones sort of give you hints a little more often. This one does, but you really kind of have to dig for them or just happen upon them. And a lot of the heart containers are just like almost if you were lucky enough to bomb the correct wall when you were just wandering around the place. It's not like a huge world, I guess, but it's still pretty difficult to find that. There's a couple occasions where it's like, hey, that wall kind of looks like it's in an an odd place. There's kind of like a just flat part there that looks like you could bomb it, and a lot of times there is something there, but not always. Some of it, I don't know how everybody found it without some sort of help, or it just took a very long time. Like, I know my dad didn't have any help back then, but somehow they figured it out, and I don't know. I don't know if I'd have the patience without having somewhat of a memory of it at this point.
Can you imagine your dad calling in on the hotline and getting tips?
I know. I don't know if he ever. I need to ask him if he ever did that. I don't think he did, but that would be kind of funny. That'd be a crazy job to have.
So some of the enemies you run into in the game, you've got Armos, which were kind of like Iron Knuckles or what are they called? Dark Nuts or what have you. Kind of the early iterations of those. You've got there's ghosts in there. They call them guineas or genies or something like that. The levers is what they're called. I didn't know they're actually called that, but they're like the things that pop up in the sand. Like I always think of Ocarina of Time, and you're going through the desert, and all those things that pop up and chase you. It's so annoying.
They're annoying here too.
Breath of the Wild. People will recognize the Lynels. They were a formidable foe in this game. It's kind of where they came from. It was really, really awesome throwback to see them in Breath of the Wild, just because of having been in the original and getting to see them in a 3D space is really, really cool. You've got your Moblins. They're pretty staple in the series. Octrox as well, and all their annoying rock throwing or spitting attacks. P-hats, which you don't see too many P-hats in the game or in Zelda games, though it was included in Ocarina of Time in the Hyrule Field. The P-hats would pop up and chase you around. And I thought they were invincible in 64, but I guess you can beat them. I found that out much later. But you just got to wait for the P-hat to kind of settle down, and before you can take it out. Once it's moving, it's invincible. So Zora's made an appearance as an enemy in this game. Super annoying. Basically, they pop up in the water and try to hit you with an energy ball or what have you, and if they're not close enough to the shore, then there's not much you can do about it unless you've got arrows. And then you've got your Tektites, which are the kind of water strider, like one-eyed bug things that jump around and make your life a pain. There is a host of enemies in the dungeons. Those are just overworld. But you've got your wall masters, your Wizrobes. You've got Stalfos, the skeletons, of course. A couple of 2D games have the Pole's voice, which are like rabbit-looking creatures. I always thought they looked like rabbit heads. I don't know what they're supposed to be other than that, but I always imagine them being rabbits. Likes, which should steal your shield. You've got your Keese, the bats, of course. Gibdo, oddly enough, the Redead counterpart that's more like a mummy than anything else. You got your dark nuts, of course. I mentioned a little bit of how there's an enemy that's like that. I guess the Armos are closer to your iron knuckles, and dark nuts are probably the other. There was these things. They were kind of annoying, but there was these like little ball things. Like looks kind of like a static ball with like a skull at the center of it. I guess these are the early bubbles, which I never really picked up that that's what they were. Like bubbles, like in Ocarina of Time, you'd fight the skulls with like the flames surrounding them. I never really like put two and two together until like just now that that's what those are.
Yeah.
I don't know why that never dawned on me ever.
I don't know if I honestly did either. Yeah, in this game, I believe they don't really hurt you. It just you can't use your sword for a few seconds after they touch you.
I want to say like in other iterations they like can drain your magic, and they don't always like take damage to your hearts or anything like that, but they are quite annoying when they bounce around and they hit you, especially in the 2D Zeldas. Some of the bosses in the dungeons, there was a dragon-like character, which was really cool inclusion, I think, called Aquamentus. I don't know, either dragon or Nessie or something. Your Dodongos, classic enemies. Drop the bomb in their mouth. Manhandle, which is a four-headed
It's like a piranha plant
Venus
looking thing.
flytrap thing.
Yeah, it's actually some of these are pretty. I don't want to interrupt you in the middle of them, but
No,
like I
go
know
for it.
with Manhandler, they're kind of easy. If you know the trick to them, a lot of the bosses are like that. So is the Dongo. There's always a trick to a lot of these. Sometimes they'll
Mhm.
have more than one way to beat them. Like there'll be sort of a harder way to beat them. But then if you know what item to use or how to use it, like some of these you can kind of get rid of fairly easily. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, you're good. There's a I don't know how you pronounce it. Gleeok. Basically a Hydra-like dragon, multiple heads that you had to take down. A Dig Dogger. I have no idea what that is. I don't know if they've even used a Dig Dogger before in any other Zelda games. It essentially looks like a floor mop or a buzzsaw blade or something, like with an
It's
eye in the
in
center. I don't know how else to describe it.
it says it's in Oracle of Seasons is one
Okay.
of the bosses again, but I think that's the only time other than like BS Legend of Zelda. I hate that name. You know what I mean?
hmm
On the Satella view.
hmm
But yeah, that's pretty much it.
And then you got your spider. Your Goma from your first boss from the Ocarina of Time. That was in one of the Zelda
Yeah.
bosses, and then of course your final boss that is the anthropomorphic boar or pig or whatever you want to call him, Ganon. Um, Very blue in this game.
hmm Yeah,
Uh,
he
s-
was definitely the hardest in this. I don't remember there being like a really great trick even against him. He turns invisible at one point.
mhm.
Um, he's tough, and he lives up to that final boss. Expected difficulty you could get out of him. Where a lot of the other ones, like Goma, if you had the arrows, he was pretty easy. A lot of them had little tricks to them, but I don't believe he really did.
You actually had to have an item to beat him, if I remember right. I think you had to have the silver arrow to actually beat the game.
Yeah, to actually kill him.
I don't know if you just keep going and going and going until he finally beats you, or what happens if you don't have that silver arrow. But definitely necessary for playing through that. So
It's another way where the game can be a little bit mean if you
hmm
if you don't know what you're doing.
yeah, you can easily walk up to the final boss and think, oh yeah, I'm gonna beat this game, and then you'll never get it because you never got the item that you need, which is tough. But that's the challenge of the NES days. But it's definitely left a legacy. Um, you could say it's a bit legendary.
All started with that gold cart, which, funny enough, I think the gray cart version of this is worth more money. But yeah,
Hmm.
I would say
Um,
like with the way this one holds up nowadays, like I said, is a little bit rough in comparison to the later Zelda games or just games in general with some of the difficulty and what some people would call sort of unfair, I guess. But you got to think of when this came out, just how amazing it was and how big of a world this was.
Mhm.
There wasn't really much of anything like it. Uh, and again, like you mentioned earlier, where they actually included I guess like a save battery or whatever it's called in the cartridge, which this may have been the first or one of the first games to do that.
Mhm.
I really wouldn't want to sit down in one setting and do this, but back then though we didn't. Man, I sound old, but I know everybody didn't have like 500 different games to choose from, or just could boot up their Switch and click one real quick, and you've got 10 others there if you don't want to play that one.
Mhm.
Things were a little more. There just wasn't as much out, like plain and simple. So you could get a lot of time out of something like this, even though there's not a ton to the game. There's a pretty decent amount of content and dungeons and things, but something like this could last you a good amount of time to really figure everything out.
I like this game has a little bit of a charm. There is a moblin that you can come across who says it's a secret to everybody. Essentially, he's a moblin that helps you out. So even some of the bad guys can be good guys in some ways.
Hmm.
And I think that was kind of charming. There's things like that that surprise you. Like not everybody's a bad guy, even though they are usually bad guys. Like there could be that one that's actually helpful to the hero. Let's go ahead and get into the music for this game. There is nothing more iconic than that opening sound when you first start the game. That classic sound. I'm gonna play it right here because it is. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of ingrained in my brain. Whenever I think of I'm going on an adventure, this song plays in my head. Da, 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 da. You know, just that chip tune classic Zelda theme. Nothing better. From the heroic overworld music to the ominous kind of dungeon music. You can kind of compare it to the Bowser Castle music in Super Mario Brothers. It has kind of that feel to it, maybe even a little bit more like I guess somber in tone. Um, such a pretty soundtrack, and impressive for what they could do with just the NES and make them so catchy.
Yeah, there's not like a ton of tracks for it, but what's there, like everything's good. You will get, I guess you will hear a couple of the same tracks a lot throughout the game, but
Mhm.
I don't feel like they get annoying. For repeating themselves as much as they can. You'll
Mhm.
hear the overworld music a lot, and basically all the dungeons have the same theme, but it's not it's not something that ever like started to grate my nerves usually. And the last dungeon actually has its own theme as well. That's a little more ominous. Leading up to Ganon.
So interesting to note. Like we did touch on a little bit about the controversy surrounding the religious symbols in the game. A lot of older games, like Dragon Quest and things like that, did use those symbols, and Japan didn't really care too much. They were just, that's what represents like something magical or holy or something was the cross or what have you. I believe that Link's shield had a cross on it, and then the Book of Magic was actually called the Bible in Japanese. Um, but if there was any retail sold or anything like that, the likeness was just like a solid shield. There was no cross on it or anything like that. Just for religious sensitivity, I guess, to make it more marketable. Um, but yeah, they did change that to the Book of Magic or the Magic Book instead of a Bible, which is kind of interesting to see that they made that change. Um, so they also say that the Manji, that third dungeon,
Oh yeah.
they said it was in the shape of a left-facing swastika, um, and it's not really a bad thing, but because it was associated with another symbol, it was controversial at that point. It's actually a Japanese character and very common in Japanese culture. Um, but it's not recognized the same in other cultures,
Yeah.
especially Western countries, due to its ties to Nazis and things like that. So it's kind of interesting that that was kind of a theme, and that's you see that today in a lot of things. Like you go and watch Disney Plus, and they have like this could have sensitive material or offensive material in it for older stuff because that just wasn't controversial at the time. Like it was just commonplace and used kind of flippantly. Whereas now it's a little bit more like, you can't really do that these days without some kind of
This was
warning or offending somebody, you know.
this was also before the ESRB existed.
Hmm.
So I'm honestly really surprised they've I'm glad they have been able to do it, thank goodness. But that they've released the original Zelda with the couple things like you've mentioned, without giving us a different version of it, without all of that symbolism in it or whatever, to keep from getting in trouble. I'm kind of surprised that they've been allowed to get away with it.
There are some blunders in the game.
Yeah,
They have had faithful ports for the most part, other than some typos, which they've corrected in some other versions and other releases. And sometimes they just keep it like the original. Like they keep. I think there was a typo in the intro as well. I know Ganon, I want to say, had two N's in the name,
yeah.
which I don't think is supposed to be. But yeah, they made some minor changes to that.
Yeah,
Um,
there's some things that got fixed with like the re-releases, like on the GameCube or on the Wii and things like that since then. Like Ganon's name is fixed. I think there's another one or two, but I believe one that's never been fixed is the word peninsula. I can't even say the word. Peninsula is like always spelled wrong, I think, in every version of it.
hmm.
I don't know if they've just constantly overlooked it or what it is, but yeah, I think there's always like a letter missing or something, if I remember correctly. I think it's in the fourth dungeon, somewhere like that, third or fourth.
So we did touch on other iterations. Josh, where can you find this game? Like, how many places has it appeared in the history of Nintendo?
Oh gosh, so outside of, correct me if I miss one here, but outside of the NES and the Famicom, um, I'll go ahead and kind of throw out there is this satellite view one that's on the Super Nintendo that's
Hmm.
similar. Without digging too much into that, it was only in Japan. It is sort of the same map. So there's that, but for this game, like truly, there is the version in Animal Crossing that you basically have to use an action replay to get to. And on the GameCube, the original Animal Crossing, there is the one on the collection disc on the GameCube, the classic series, so to speak, on the Game Boy Advance. The Wii Virtual Console had it. Let's see, the Wii U Virtual Console, the 3DS Virtual Console, which sadly didn't get a 3D version of this game.
It was
And of
demoed
course,
though. There was a
yeah,
demo shown off at E3 one year that had that as part of the collection. I think Mega Man 2 was also in there as a 3D option, which would have been really cool if it actually became a thing, you know. And
for
then I
sure.
also think I saw Yoshi's Island 2 was also mentioned on that as a possibility for classic games going to 3D. I wish they would have invested more into that because it was super fascinating. The ones that I did play, like Kid Icarus and things like that.
It was. They look good too. But outside of that, it's on the Switch, on the whatever app, the NES app, along with the special version of it that like gives you all the hearts and what have you.
Mhm.
I think that's it. Which is quite a bit. I might have missed one in there, but
Just the
quite a.
classic, the NES classic,
Oh
but
yeah, but yeah, it's on there as well. So if you want to play it, I mean, it's out there.
mhm.
Pretty easy to find.
And in the future, we may even get a Game and Watch.
Yeah, yeah, there is that. There's the Game and Watch game. It's not this game, I guess, but it's there is the Game and Watch Legend of Zelda, which I would take that. I like my Super Mario Brothers one. It's a little bit of a goofy purchase, I guess, but it's cool. I'd take it with the like the Game and Watch Zelda and the NES Zelda and maybe one other thing in there to round out the package a little bit. Right now, we don't have anything for the anniversary of Zelda, the 35th one, announced, which is kind of unfortunate. Like, I know they can't do that for every series, and Mario is Mario. I understand that too. And Mario definitely deserves it. If only one series does, it's Mario, but I'd say Zelda's a close second.
Mhm.
At least for me, Zelda's always been one of my favorite series. So hopefully we'll still see something out of that. Maybe something around this original game. I don't know if I want to see it remade. I don't know if it would have the same. I don't know if I want to say charm, but I just don't know if it'd have the same feel. Like if they went back and added more hints, or to make it too much more too easy. I don't think it would. It almost wouldn't feel like the same game anymore.
Mhm.
But you can definitely see the roots of the series here, as it is from this point forward. Of course, things did get a little more easy to comprehend outside of maybe Zelda 2, which is just kind of a different game entirely. Well, not entirely, but somewhat. But like with A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, those next ones up, they were still top down, but things got a little more easy to know where to go next. It still
Mhm.
wasn't. Sometimes it was still a little difficult, but like this one, just drops you out in the middle of a field, literally with nothing. The others are a little bit different from that, so I think that keeps this one pretty interesting and kind of unique in the series. Breath of the Wild kind of does something similar, which I really appreciated, where you're you're almost literally naked when you start that game, and then you find the old man like a few feet away. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah. That's kind of a cool like arrow to draw there, and similarities from those. This game, Legend of Zelda, has always been a pioneer in video games. This was the first real open world like game, and it had the save states with it. And then you've got Ocarina of Time, which pushed the bar further, in the 3D space, and what a 3D adventure would be like. And then you've got, your Breath of the Wild, which took it even further with like a huge open world with zero loading screens. Like it was just insane the amount that you look at it, you can go there. The world was just staggering, how big it was. And so they're always setting these new milestones and these new trends for video games, and it's awesome to see that it's such a rich history, all stemming from this one game that was also a juggernaut and a legend in its own right.
Oh yeah, it's one of those things where like it when they translated it to 3D, I actually personally like the 3D iterations usually a little bit better than the
Hmm.
2D. But that's not to say like the 2D ones don't hold up. It's kind of like Mario, I think, even in that instance where I think they both translated very well to 3D, and they're almost like two completely different experiences, but they both work.
I'm really glad that this became a thing, and this is Nintendo's IP, their house. It's a staple for sure. It's sometimes they lean into it more than they do even Mario in a lot of cases. I think if you boiled it down, Mario and Zelda keep Nintendo going, um, and will always be kind of a popular title from the company. And that is like, if you don't think of Mario, you think of Zelda. They kind of go hand in hand. And sure, there's other things that'll probably go on, in future, like Animal Crossing. Now that the world has been exposed to that, with COVID and getting into that, but like nothing's quite like the Legend of Zelda, and the meme will never die that Zelda is a guy in a green outfit. The gender confusion, despite all that, it's not never. I hope that someday that Metroid will be in that kind of light like Zelda, but I never expect it because Metroid didn't set any kind of precedent, any kind of it didn't set the world on fire. It didn't change up any formulas. It didn't wow the world, um, and set a new bar for video games. And so that's why this Legend of Zelda always outshines that series. But you know, in that way, like nothing is more iconic than Mario, I'd say. But for as far as gameplay, Zelda's where it's at, and it all started with this little gold cartridge on the NES.
For sure, and you're right. I actually still feel like, and while I probably preferred Zelda, I really feel like something like Metroid could have been a kind of a third tier like this. I'm not sure. Not to get too. I feel like I'm getting a little off topic there, but I even remember like in the early GameCube days, there was I think it was Game Informer. It had like three different issues. Maybe it was that one. One had Mario Sunshine or Mario on it. One had Samus for Prime, and one had Link for Wind Waker. And I just there for a while, I always kind of looked at those three as like being the big three, that hung out since
Mhm.
like the '80s. So, on a little side note there, I will say I hope Metroid maybe kind of gets to that level, kind of their third, tier behind Mario and Zelda
Mhm.
there again. Um, but yeah, I can definitely see. For me, I definitely see why Zelda is as popular as it is, and why it's stood the test of time. And seeing it sort of evolve again, almost in a backwards way in some ways, like with the way Breath of the Wild is,
Mhm.
and akin to the original Zelda in some ways more so than some of the other games before that. It's interesting to go back, especially to this original one, and just kind of see how it's changed and how they've stuck to some of those roots and how they're even potentially going back to some of those roots that was originally lost over
Mhm.
time. It's sort of a link to the past. That was bad.
It's not bad. I would find it really funny if Breath of the Wild 2 follows in the same vein, and moves on to Zelda 2. So it's going to be like really, really weird, like Zelda 2 was from the first one. But
They seem to
no.
like to do that with sequels sometimes with Zelda 2 and Majora's Mask, and usually I'm okay with that. Let it get a little crazy.
So I still hope, like, I know it's probably not going to happen, but I hope to someday experience The Legend of Zelda, the original, in some 3D manner, whether it's playing it in VR, with the virtual reality headset and getting that 3D effect, or I don't know, somehow putting it on the 3DS. It's not unheard of, but I'd like to experience the original. Sure, you can do the 2D HD treatment, which would be kind of cool, actually. If done well, I wouldn't mind seeing that updated. Um, I think we're more likely to see a Link to the Past over this one beginning to remaster, but it'd be kind of cool to see.
I prefer
Mhm.
this one over A Link to the Past. I know some people
Same.
will kill me for that, but that's just me.
I feel that way too, but again, I don't have really nostalgia for Link to the Past like I do the original Zelda or any of the
Mhm.
others. So I feel you there. Well, guys, I think that brings us to the end of the show. Josh, do you want to do our due diligence?
Sure. So on Twitter, you can find us at Nintendo_nostalgia. On Facebook, of course, we are Nintendo Nostalgia on there as well. There's the Nintendo Nostalgia chat group to join on there. That's always got a lot going on. We are also on Instagram at Nintendo_nostalgia. So yeah, check us out in all of those places.
Cool. Thank you very much. We will see you guys next week for another awesome episode. Later, Preston.
Bye.